that there are
Sure. No, absolutely.
good ideas and bad ideas. There are that we do want to move towards a greater sense of evolution, a greater sense of embodying what you described.
Yeah. And ideas are very important to me. Like I know I said a minute ago, I'm not really attached to the ideas about the age of the earth, but it's like a whole load of political and economic ideas I feel very attached to, and very much like they'd bring great value to the world if they were explored more and introduced more. So I'm very passionate about my ideas. I'm not in a position of saying we should all sort of let go of our ideas and hold hands. I'm, the reason for like engaging in this conversation is because of an intense sense of passion around ideas, but also recognizing a futility to just having passion. Because I think, like you say about the defensive response, I think my natural inclination, as well as a lot of people's, can be, okay, if we're going to have a discussion about like our contrasting views, Fiona, I'm going to lead with like my best argument on why the minimum wage should be abolished. Okay, I'm going to give you that one, right? And I'm going to use my clearest logic. I'm going to make sure there's no way you can like escape from that through some loophole, and then you'll be convinced, right? Because that's what people do when they're presented with a good argument. Well, in Socratic dialogues maybe, but nowhere else actually. So instantly, I'm not saying for you, but if you do this, if I did that with a lot of people who were, let's say, on the political left and attached to those ideas, it could very well fire instantly a defensive shutdown kind of response, right? Where rather than convince them, I've just made them feel like, hang on a minute, someone's trying to, it's like you've got some salesman at your door trying to scam you. And if this guy's, he's on some sort of corporate lobby group, right? And he's come up with some clever, tricky argument. No, I don't like the sound of this. And I think what I noticed myself is, and I think it's pervasive, is my core feeling of frustration arises out of like a sense of not being listened to, right? And I think that's what I see a lot going on in the world, of people feel that they're not listened to, like the other hasn't understood the position they're in to begin with and why they're there, and then they're not willing to listen because they want to be listened to first, right? And I find this in a lot of disagreements I have. It's like, okay, who gets to be listened to first? And I don't know, like, where we go with this to have a productive change in the world. I recall, like, one of the most inspiring things I've seen, one of those beautiful films I saw. I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it, but it was on reconciliation groups in Palestine, Israel, where you would have people on either side of that divide, often very locked into their own positions, coming together and having to spend time listening to each other and taking it in turns, and this idea of suspending judgment, suspending opinions to take on another narrative. And I think they had to do something like, they had to tell each other's stories, and they had to argue from the perspective of the other. And these are the kind of things people do when you get to an extreme. Like the situation in the Middle East, it's beyond extreme, right? But I also think it's probably where we're at with things like Brexit and Trump and the left-right economic divide, is that we need to go beyond like shouting at each other on the internet and move to some kind of forum like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's not until we start to touch into those deeper places with each other that we can move beyond that I'm right, no, I'm right position. When I mean, I've seen it lots of times, that when we actually start to tell our stories and the real story, not just the cover story, as it were, there will be compassion is the natural response to that, isn't it? When we hear our each other's deepest human stories, it's not that then we try to understand or try to be compassionate, but that we naturally are, because we know our own version of that.
Yeah.
So as you say, those kind of I think we have to touch into it on that level to really make progress, as well as doing that for ourselves. I mean, I think there's two parts to this, isn't there? One is to do our own inner work, so that we're engaged in that ongoing process of being willing to look and see, what am I believing? What do I think about those people? What is driving this? And being willing to get into those kind of reconciliations with people. And that does mean suspending that urge to be right or to prove ourselves or to, win out in some way.
Yeah, because I personally find it much more enriching in life to be able to see from as many perspectives as possible. And I'm not saying I always do it, but I particularly notice it when I meet people who are just very locked into the one. My feeling is that's kind of a prison, and it's not. You're just not going to enjoy life as much by just hammering the same. And it's also a very frustrating way to live because you have to go through life wondering why everyone else is so stupid and they just don't get it, which is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you can cut yourself off into that kind of bunker, can't you? I mean, that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? That kind of bunker mentality where they're all
Yeah.
idiots, or they're all out to get me in some way, and I think that actually, in a sense, prevents us from seeing what's really going on, what actually is threatening or not. We get a skewed sense of what's going on, and then we can't see the wood for the trees. Then we can't make sense of it all.
Yeah, and I notice, I think my initial fears in doing this were around, kind of what we were saying about, would your opinion on the top rate of tax change if you suddenly didn't feel so harshly towards the 1%, right? And I can recall in various settings, in religious dialogues, in economic dialogues, feeling like if I took on the other's point of view, maybe I wouldn't have a self anymore. Maybe I wouldn't have a point of view. I'd just be whatever group I was in. I'd lose myself. And it was almost like a sense of like almost bravery and go, okay, like I'm going to take the plunge, 3, 2, 1, here we go, dive in and see from their perspective. And then it does feel for a moment like, oh yeah, I could be a left-wing socialist, or I could be an evangelical Christian, or whatever. But then I come back to myself and I remember, oh yeah, but there's all these reasons why I think this. And I might change a bit, but I don't lose myself. I still generally hold the same perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. My sense is similar to that, the same perspectives, but maybe a little lighter,
Yeah.
or a little less self-righteously, or something along those lines. But I think it's a great experiment. I mean, I do it now through acting. I go
Oh,
to an
right.
acting class once a week. So by definition, I'm
Yeah.
playing different roles at different times, in all sorts of different ways. And I think it's a great thing for all of us to try on, however we do that, but just to play with, like, well, how would it be to be this and not that? What would that look like? Because, as you say, when you realize that actually you're still you,
Yeah.
that it's not your beliefs and opinions that make you you are simply you, and they're added into the mix, then that, I think, frees us up somewhat, and we may well stay in the same positions, but I think we're in them differently.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Okay, thank you for all that, Fiona. Is there anything else you'd like to
Pleasure.
say?
No, I think really just if anything, to encourage people to investigate in the ways that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I know. I'd be interested to see what people's feelings are about that, because even to the point of really consciously going down that road and maybe creating some sort of format for people to, because people are massively engaged in political dialogue online. I think it'll be interesting if a format emerged where that was done a little bit differently with a different ethos.
Yeah, really nice to talk to you.
Nice. I'll
Thanks,
link
Richard.
to, thank you, Fiona. I'll link to Fiona's website and your book below, from which we were referring to the chapter.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.